if you look at Hannah Arendt, what you discover is that as a philosopher, she was also a journalist, and she represented American newspapers at the trial of Eichmann in Jerusalem. And she wrote about Eichmann. Eichmann was found guilty of running the train system that shipped all of the Jewish people to the various camps. He was very efficient, very good at his job. In listening to the trial and reporting on him, she referred to him as the banality of evil. In other words, yes, okay, he was doing a completely evil job, but as far as he was concerned, he was just doing his job. And it's banal, that's not. So the world, at least the Jewish community in the United States, wanted to hear how evil this guy was, and she reported, no, he was just a normal person doing his job. It's just that the job he was assigned by the bureaucracy was incredibly evil. So the community basically were furious with her because of that. And Mel Brooks being a member of that community, I kind of think that yes, he was basically making a joke at her expense. Even though he was asked about it and he denied it, which of course doesn't mean that it wasn't. So that's just, but so when you think of totalitarian, that's kind of where we get the definition from her. She's interesting all by herself, by the way, for lots of other reasons. And becoming really more important today, Hannah Arendt, because more people are reading about her. But tribal conquerors. Now those are interesting because while this wants everybody to follow the ethical norms of a particular leader or leadership, right? The tribal assumes that you have lots of different groups, and it's our group over yours. Aristotle taught Alexander not to be that way. He didn't play tribes against one another. He instead encouraged everyone to join. In fact, remember, when he was fighting against the enemy, he sent out word to the people that once he conquered this evil dictator, they would be free to do what they wanted. He was there to release them from bondage and so on. And they liked that, and in fact, a lot of folks joined his army to fight against the armies that he was fighting against. Right? But tribal, that's where you have different groups all thinking of themselves as essentially saved. We're saved as long as you do what we do, but those folks over there are evil, etc. And then the other is individual. That's where, of course, each person is really on their own. And we really don't see very often that kind of thing. But Alexander promoted a pluralism in his empire, which seems to have been something he learned from his teacher. But after the empire ends, it actually splits up into three ways, if you're familiar with how that goes on. But after Aristotle, the post-Aristotelians break up into a series of different possibilities. And that's what we'll be looking at next class. And you get everything from the skeptics. There are Aristotelians. We might even consider some of the others Aristotelians, but we break them down into things like the Epicureans. Epicureans are followers of Epicurus, as we'll see. So Epicurus. So notice Epicurus is a contemporary of Aristotle, right? And what kind of philosophy does Epicurus teach? It's an Aristotelian-based philosophy, really, but at the same time, the focus is on the self, and he's not so concerned about the larger community. Remember, for Aristotle, you have to be concerned about the whole polity, so you can't survive and be excellent in a society that isn't excellent itself. For Epicurus, we can instead focus on the garden. Live in your own little garden where you're self-sufficient for yourself, and that way you can be excellent and not worry about what's going on out there, right? So Epicurus is one of the ones we can read for Wednesday. Another is Epictetus. Epictetus is an example of what we call a Stoic. The original founder of Stoicism was Zeno, a different Zeno than the follower of Parmenides. But Zeno, the Stoic, where does the word stoa come from? The pillars that you see in the typical Greek architecture, and the Romans copied it. So you have these pillars out in front. Those are referred to as the stoa. And they were also usually painted, by the way, so you might even see the expression stoa pokoile, which means the painted stoa, the painted porch, whatever. And that was because they used to teach their students out on the porches of the buildings. And so they became known as the Stoics. And the Stoics are focused on the excellence of the self, recognize that you have to live in a society, and in order for the society to be excellent, you have to participate in doing what you can to help that society. And yet they also discover that in doing that, life can be absolutely hell, because the kind of jobs that need to be done in a society are often really miserable. If you've ever sat in on a committee meeting, running some kind of a committee meeting, and everyone gets to talk. We have this problem in Anchorage. If you look at the assembly, everybody has time. They can come up to the podium and they get their time to talk. And the poor assembly people, you see them all sitting there bored to tears because they've got to listen to everyone. Even though 90% of the folks that come up, 90% of the time, this is statistics. 40% of all statistics are made up on the spot. And I just made those up. But you get the idea. There's a lot of wasted time. So a lot of the time that they spend on Tuesday nights is boring, feels like a waste, feels like you're not getting anywhere, because these are not the smartest people on the block, and they're not really raising issues that are relevant to what we're trying to actually accomplish, etc., etc. So Stoicism is an attempt to try to teach a person how to go through those kinds of events without getting upset. So Stoicism, that's another type of philosophy we could look at. And the skeptics is another skeptical. Well, basically the skeptics are those that don't believe we can know anything essentially. We can't really figure out what our values ought to be. There's, so-and-so thinks these values are good. This person thinks these values are good. How do I determine between the Palestinians and the Israelis? How do you solve that? Right? Everybody's interested in trying to figure out a solution to that. There's lots of situations like the Ukrainian-Russian thing. the border thing. You think of any of the situations we got, how do you resolve those? A skeptic takes an easy way out by saying there's no solution. At least we can't think of anything. So they don't vest their interest in one side or the other. Instead, they relax, step out of it, and feel like that's how they can keep an excellent life for themselves without getting involved in sides. I wanted to mention the one we already mentioned once, and that was the cynic. Cynical, definition of cynics. Diogenes was the one that I mentioned. By the way, if you come upstairs to our philosophy department, in the one wall we have a big painting of what's called the School of Athens. I should do that. I should show you the School of Athens. So this is the painting we have up there. Notice that this is from a mural. It's a picture of the mural in the Vatican Library. And in fact, you can see that it's niched in. This is the real arch. And here's, in fact, the door. And here's the panel underneath it. But here's the mural that's there. And notice what you've got is Plato and Aristotle in the very center. There's the vanishing point. You're into art. Notice that Plato's pointing up. Aristotle's kind of, and Aristotle's in earth colors, and Plato is in sky colors. This Slav draped in the middle of the steps there, that's Diogenes. So the cynic, the dog philosophy, essentially. Do dogs really worry about virtue ethics and things of that sort? No. But, they basically, at least for some, seem to have a typically interesting life. The one other one that we're going to look at is Plotinus. And Plotinus, here's my Wikipedia, I'll use that. Plotinus, you can see he had a screwed up nose. That could have been funny. It's obviously the statue that got busted. I think they'd have fixed it before they took the photo. Maybe not. In a way, I guess he looks a little like Professor, what's the name of the professor in the Harry Potter series that has a chunk of his nose missing? Moody, Alistair Moody. Yes? Yeah. But really, seriously, Plotinus is a Neo-Platonist. So of all of the ones you think of, a Neo-Platonist is someone who is still very much attached to Plato's philosophy, and that's still available as a serious philosophical position. In fact, it's very close to the Christian philosophy, which, notice his dates, he's a contemporary of Christians, and in fact, one of his teachers, Ammonius Saccas, was a Christian. Well, he always was, but he was at least a Christian some of the time. And so what's interesting is that this philosophy has very clear connections to Christianity, which we will see when we move on. Next class we'll be talking about these post-Aristotelians. The following class after that, though, I'm going to focus on the religious movements of the time, especially Christian, so that we can get a sense of why the philosophies move on to the direction that they do, right? However, my quiz question today kind of focuses on Plotinus. And the question is, what do you think of the golden ratio? The golden ratio. What do you think of it? If you've never heard of it, look it up and see all the things. It's amazing because, like, your teeth, if you think of how your teeth get smaller, you have the large tooth in the front on both sides because we're, generally speaking, we're bilaterally symmetrical. Okay. But then the next teeth over are, by the golden ratio, smaller. And then the next teeth over, by the golden ratio, smaller again, and so on. The perfect examples that they show in nature are usually things like the nautilus,